Greetings everyone, my name is Clover, and in this one we're going to be ranking the best and worst ultimates that there are currently in Overwatch. And how I'm going to go about and rank these comes down to 3 points. For the first one being threat and impact potential. So here we're going to look at the stats like the damage numbers, the duration, the healing numbers, defense numbers, whatever it is, as well as the eye test of it, which is, it's going to be opinion based, but what's a good tier list without some opinions? The second point is usability. How frequent you can use this ultimate, whether or not it requires a lot of setup in order to find value. So you're going to hold on to it and you're not going to use it as freely. Whereas some other ultimates charge up way more quickly and they're expendable in that case, which means you can use it more freely, or it doesn't require a lot of setup and it's something that you could just toss out there proactively to try and turn the tides of the fight. The third point, counterability. Can you shut down this ultimate? How easy is it to get blocked or destroyed? Or even, are you vulnerable when you use this ultimate? That's a criteria that we're looking at. So I guess we should start off with the first one. Being in the D tier is Bastion's reconfiguration mode. This one you'd prefer to be in the turret mode because the turret mode creates so much pressure from its high damage output, means that when you swap to tank mode, you're losing all that damage pressure, and that means you're not dealing as much damage to the enemy's shield to zone off enemies because there's not a lot of incoming damage that they really have to respect anymore. That's kind of mitigated. Not only that, it's really hard to land these shots because A, it's projectile, and B, it's hard to find these angles to try and land these direct hits. Yeah, it's better to have that luxury of swapping between your turret mode and recon mode. And then the other one at the D tier is Doomfist's ultimate Meteor Strike, which it's not going to find a lot of value, at least offensively. It's primarily used to escape after Doomfist goes for a normal engage. But for this one, the reason why you can't go offensive with it is for the fact that it's so easy to dodge. With the epicenter, the radius of the kill spot being so small, enemies can literally just walk away with it with just some basic reaction speed. There's a huge windup. There's a big voice line that kind of allows you to figure out where Doomfist is going, and when he's landing, it's very slow. People can also, because Doomfist is stagnant when he's landing, people can use different abilities to sleep dart him, to hook him in, to stun him, and potentially kill him when he's just exiting his ultimate. So it leaves him very vulnerable. Funny enough, I think D.Va's remake is just better than Doomfist's ultimate. It's legitimately the exact same thing, the same idea. The thing is that this has no voice line, which means she's not going to be as predictable, and she's going to, it's going to be subtle. It also deploys way faster than Doomfist's ultimate. It lands faster, and that's another reason why it's better than Doomfist's ultimate. The reason why it's D tier is because it only happens when you're in Baby D.Va form. All right, C tier. These are legitimate ultimates that you kind of have to respect no matter what. And the first one is going to be Tactical Visor. This one doesn't deal enough damage by itself to, kill things fast enough. People, if they're close to nearby cover, walls, can just walk away. They will take a little bit of damage there, but they can walk away and not die from it. You might have seen this on ladder where they nano visor, and that's when it becomes deadly, but just by itself, it doesn't have that same potency. Not only that, it doesn't change any damage numbers, nor does it give a soldier any defensive or resistance to anything, which means tanks can contest him, and without that damage amplified or headshot potential, because it doesn't have that, it means that tanks can actually just kill him as if he was just a normal soldier. And the next one suffers from the same problem. It's just very slow. The cast time that it has warns players to, the dragon is coming on in. So what people have to do is react to it, and they strafe either left or right, and they're safe. It does have a high damage, so if people do get caught out, it kills people in a snap. And it's really effective when it's got a setup ultimate like Grav or Gravitic Flux. But again, super slow, likely not going to find any value. Now this is where we get into the section where these ultimates are more meaty, so to speak, where they don't require a lot of setup. And I think the first one is going to be Genji's Dragon Blade. With this one, with the high potency and the agility with the dash, allows Genji to quickly eliminate and assassinate targets with its high damage blade. The problem is exactly that. It's a blade. You trade a sword in an FPS game. So what usually happens is that the Genji will dash right on in, but get booped or get stunned, and he's just as vulnerable, kind of like the Soldier Tac Visor. But that's why it's in the C tier, because good in the right context, when it's paired up with a Nano Blade to try and mitigate some of that damage, or if it's tracking cooldowns properly and finding these windows of opportunity, it allows Genji to quickly clean up without the enemies having a way to defend against it. Then there is Death Blossom. I like this ultimate quite a lot for its assassination potential, because a lot of these ultimates so far have a voice line that signifies, hey, I'm using my ultimate right now, prepare yourself. Reaper's ultimate doesn't have that. You just press Q and you just hear the die, die, die. You kill backliners, and that's kind of how it works. It's an assassination ultimate. If you try and use it amongst an entire enemy team, or if that person you try and kill is very evasive, like a tracer, it's hard to find that value, and you actually leave yourself susceptible to a lot of threats because you're slow moving, and a headshot from a Widowmaker is very possible, or you just get like, you can't find any value because you're short range and all the enemies just ran away. And on the same spectrum as far as Barrage, exact same thing, where it's a high damage ultimate and doesn't have this initial sound cue. It's once you use it, you're basically committed. The result usually looks like a trade of some sort, where you get 1, maybe 2 kills, but you trade your life as a result. And then right under that is going to be Reinhardt's Earth Shatter. Just to summarize it quickly, it's a coin flip. It really depends on the enemy team comp, because if it's something like Dive, you're not going to connect onto multiple enemies, which you'd prefer to do, or enemies are going to be positioned on high grounds where you need to be in high ground in order to find value, because it's like an earthquake, you can't hit, above ground. Or you're going to be faced up against another Reinhardt yourself, and there's a shield that could potentially block it. But when it does land, that thing is just as deadly as EMP. Then we're on to the B tier list, which I label as solid, and my definition of that is ultimates that are going to yield more consistent value than the ones previously. These are ultimates that don't require a lot of setup. You can kind of just use them and probably find some sort of value, whether it be zoning or actual kills. So the first one on this list, I think, is going to be... Oh, it's pretty tough because I'm just looking at my ranks here. I think Infrasight is going to be the bottom of the B tier, but at least it gives you that wall hacks that allows your entire team to figure out what is going on, to make or at least give you the option to make a better plan, and see where the enemies are coming from. At the very least, those low ranked players won't be surprised by a Reaper or a flanking Roadhog because they see when they're coming. But I think most importantly, it really allows the snipers, especially Widowmaker herself, to pop off, because what will usually happen, the Infrasight comes on out, the rest of the backliners try and hide away. What Widowmaker can do with her long range capability is take these off angles, so when enemies think they're safe, they're actually not, because they're just right in the crosshairs of Widowmaker. Then that leads us to Winston's ultimate Primal Rage. You might have heard of Primal Blade. Well, usually that comes from these high-ranked Winston players utilizing the 1000 HP bonus that you get from it, while also dealing this huge damage potential when you juggle people into a corner. But for more of these less experienced players, you still have that disruption factor, and at the very least, you're going to disrupt the enemy team's setup and potentially get and isolate an opponent that allows your team to get that player advantage, and you can probably snowball the rest of the team fight from there. Deadeye goes right after that one, and this one is a hard one to rate because it's very vulnerable to other cooldowns because of the low speed factor of it, but what you really like about it is its ability to just basically get instant value when on the flank. If people are caught unaware and are just rotating, they're not near cover, this one can be super deadly because the cast time or the build-up time before you actually get those skulls is very short, and you can find these kills relatively easy. It's also one of these ultimates when you just have a basic shield in front of you to mitigate the damage and allow you to get into these open sight lines without risking your life. With just a basic shield, you can mark all these skulls upon the enemy team and break through shields, which means it can also penetrate through other opponents, and you can actually get a surprising amount of kills from it. At the very least, zoning, and it's a long zoning time too, where sometimes people mistime the duration of Deadeye, and people will peek preemptively and you can get some kills off there too. It's one of those weird ultimates where it kind of hinges on your teammates to set you up or for the opponents to be dumb, but usually those overlap and you'll find one of the two situations there. Wrapping up the rest of the B tier, these are ultimates that have high impact, but also have the risk of being vulnerable. Riptire, when Junkrat uses his ultimate, it has that potential of wiping entire enemy teams, but the problem is that when people try and kite back, it means you're going to get minimal value, maybe 1, maybe 2 kills. This also means while you're using Riptire, you only control Riptire, and your Junkrat body yourself can be easily capitalized on by another flanker or a sniper that manages to find your camping grounds. D.Va's ultimate is just as well. When she uses it offensively, she's in Baby D.Va form, 150 HP, the lowest HP there is in the entire game. And so there is that brief moment of invulnerability. I also don't think the ultimate is super impactful when used offensively, especially just by itself, unless you have proper setups. But I think for the most part, this ultimate is going to be used to remake, and that function alone, just that consistency of making sure that you have that second life, is really important. And Whole Hog, which has the same amount of potency as the other ones, I think it's a little more consistent because it's usually followed up by Roadhog's hook. It can instantly evaporate a tank just like that. Being relatively cheap too really helps in this case. The vulnerability, however, is that if you're unaware of where your positioning is at and you're caught out in the open without some cover to protect yourself, long range DPS can try and focus you, and if you get poked out, you're going to have to use your take a breather, and when you don't have take a breather, you're actually a dive target because you don't have your escape ability. B tier is just exactly what it is. It's solid. I don't think anyone's going to disagree or really complain about these ultimates. They're going to provide exactly what they provide, and yeah, I don't think anyone's going to have a downside perspective of these. A tier, however, these are basically just a step above the B tier, being even more consistent, more impactful, and I think just overall easier to use. There are some weird cases like Morio's Coalescence, which they farm up super quickly to the point where if you farm them up between 30 to 40 seconds, you're going to have your ultimate faster than anyone else. And if you have the ultimate advantage, you can push that advantage and actually win fights with its high healing sustainability as well as its damage potential to try and solidify kills. On the same regard is going to be Mercy's Valkyrie. Now this one by itself is kind of like Coalescence. It's got that healing potential, and the damage boost allows or enables her team to, be more effective offensively. But I think what's most important about this one is it grants Mercy more evasiveness so that she's not going to die. She's not a dive target anymore, and also allows her to use her Resurrect ability, which it's an ability. It's not a cooldown, but how they connect each other is what makes them powerful, because the Resurrect honestly is kind of like an ultimate, but it has that risk factor. When you have Valkyrie, it just makes everything go smoothly. Then we kind of go into Blizzard. I don't know where to rank this. I just know it's a really impactful one. What's weird about it is people can't escape it if it's a high hypermobile comp you're playing it against, but more of these slower comps, definitely you'll find value. As well as it's such a large radius that you will probably catch multiple enemies, and the duration, the longevity of this ability means that it's very easy to clean them up. I guess the problem with it is that it just charges up slowly. Next up is Tracer's Pulse Bomb. This one is exactly like Coalescence. It's the fastest farming ultimate you can get, and you can use it almost like a cooldown. But it's a cooldown that has a kill potential. It's insane. The ability to stick it onto any player, so it is a high skill cap, but if you do connect onto a person for a kill, you have that player advantage, and more times than not, that leads to teamfight victories. At the very least, you're going to force out these very important cooldowns. If you land it onto tanks, it's going to force out a lot of support ultimate or cooldowns, maybe even ultimates, honestly. But what it could also do is if you land it onto squishies, which they're going to die to it. Baptiste uses Lamp, which is sometimes considered an ultimate. That's just a lot of value. The Minefield 2 is one of these high, fast, recharging ultimates. This one appears every other fight, and its high potency comes from the minefield damage, of course, as well as the pile driver, which stun locks enemies into it. It's super effective when placed onto objective points, because if enemies want to capture or defend the objective point, they have to sit on that minefield and are kind of trapping themselves. It's one of those ultimates where it doesn't necessarily show up on the kill feed, but the intangibles of just zoning off players and the fact that it buys time is really important. Following up a zoning ultimate with another zoning ultimate is going to be Molten Core. Torbjorn's ultimate. Wow, speaking. Pretty much used for the exact same function. I think this one is just going to be more threatening because you can more easily direct where you want to put your puddles, I guess. Where Minefield is kind of stationary in a formation, this one you can put on top of the objective point, but also try and throw it onto the supports, and the supports will have to expose themselves by dropping off a high ground or something to that effect. So it's a little more versatile, but yeah, pretty much the exact same as Minefield. All right, so Sound Barrier. This one, I would consider it the worst defensive ultimate there is in the entire game. However, it's still a defensive ultimate, which grants your entire team, if of course in line of sight, 1000 extra HP or something like that, just in a crazy ridiculous amount. You use that to answer other enemy ultimates, or you can use it to try and aggress, and with the extra HP, like I mentioned, it's kind of like a go button. Amplification Matrix. This one was hard for me to rate because I kept seeing other tier lists that had this one on the S tier or high A tier. It kind of is on the high A tier. It's something that requires high mechanical skill, like you're relying on yourself or your teammates to follow through, and it's something that can be avoided, like find no value except just to buy some extra time on the clock. And I think that's exactly what its strength is its versatility, because you can not only use it for offensive reasons, but use it to sustain your tanks. And technically, if you have tanks that are, have a brain and realize that they're getting that extra amplified healing, that means that they have resource advantage, can challenge the other main tank knowing they have better healing resources. It's a tough one for me to rate, but this is where I place it. That's more based on the eye test. Then we have Graviton Surge. This one's definitely based on the eye test. Yeah, it's not going to deal very much damage, and it's more dependent on the Zarya player and the teammates who try and follow up on the grab. It clusters enemies all together, which means it's perfect for setting up other ultimates to try and win entire team fights. By itself, I mean, you could try and follow up with Reinhardt's Hammer or pairing it up with Sticky Bombs. It does need that follow-up in order to be impactful, but I think it's pretty easy when it clumps enemies up in one central location. It kind of got beat by Gravitic Flux, by just Zarya being not the greatest character there is in the game, and Sigma just having a better ultimate. So yeah, so be it. Simwall is also a high impact ultimate, something that requires a little bit of understanding of where you need to position the shield, whether you're using it to for your supports so that your supports don't get dove, maybe for your front line so that your Symmetra can have this Reinhardt shield, this massive Reinhardt shield, so that she can farm up her beam from safety. But also, if you try and use it to split lanes, it allows your team to shield dance and mitigate a lot of damage, relieving some of the pressure from your supports and allowing your teammates to overall sustain longer than your opponents. Supercharger is another high impact ult. I wouldn't consider S tier, which a lot of other players say it's S tier. Honestly, if I were to move this up, I think Amplification Matrix is going to be higher than this, mainly because this one doesn't yield inherent value. You do place it down and you have that going for you. It can be destroyed and can be countered by other ultimates or abilities, so it's something that you have to know where to place it, but also have the teammates to follow up with it. Unfortunately, though, the stats try and disprove me because it's, I think, the second highest win rate ultimate. So don't get me wrong, the A tier, I am being very nitpicky trying to organize these top ultimates, but it's still really impactful. It's crazy good. What, 50% damage boost to all enemies within line of sight? Whoo! Now on to S tier, win buttons. Well, some of these are win buttons, some of these maybe not so much win buttons, but I want to put Nano Boost up here in the S tier because of how fast it charges up. It charges as fast as Minefield. Minefield charges up really fast, so that kind of puts into perspective how impactful this ultimate can be, because when you consider it gives 50% damage boost as well as 50% damage resistance, when put onto the right hero that really wants to get in and deal all this damage, face tank a little bit, that's when it's crazy good, especially with the Nano Blade, empowering long-range heroes like Soldier with Tactical Visor. Either way, when used offensively or defensively, considering the fact it does heal 250 HP, it has that potential to sway fights and overwhelm support lines, create a lot of space because of that fact. Yeah, it's just really good. All right, the next one on S tier is going to be Ashe's ultimate, Bob. The best zoning ultimate in the entire game, allowing Ashe to throw Bob into whatever position she likes. It adds a 7th man to the battlefield, so you have a player advantage. It deals the same amount of damage as Soldier, and it has tactical visor. It could see just as far as Soldier as well. It's got 1200 HP, 200 more than Primal Rage. This thing is insane. Not only that, because Ashe is able to place it wherever she wants, she could put it to contest points. And that means it creates another pressure angle that the enemies have to contest point, give up high grounds, give up key areas, and open up a lot of space for your teammates to set up and then eventually overwhelm them. Because, I mean, Bob also lasts for a significantly amount of time. This one is one of the top ultimates, the more I think about it. And because of that, I'm going to rank Echo's duplicate just under that. Because, I mean, it's still really good ultimates. But duplicate doesn't yield inherent value. And if you use it improperly, you can get caught out. It's a high skill cap one as well. The thing with Echo's duplicate, though, is that it kind of breaks the game, honestly, because from a 2-2-2 rule queue, 2 tanks, 2 DPS, 2 supports, you can have potentially 3 tanks, 1 DPS, 2 supports. And when you have 3 tanks, we all know how powerful tanks are with their ultimates, with their abilities, adding a potential shield, adding that extra damage threat from like Roadhog's hook. There's so many things that tanks have that make them super potent. And when you have 3 of them, whew. And then one of my personal favorite ultimates, I'm going to rank Sigma's Gravitic Flux right here. I like it very much because it's a setup ultimate like Graviton Surge. The best thing about it, though, it deals damage, 50% of the hero's health pool, as well as has a bigger radius, so you're going to catch up all those enemies. And realistically, the only answer to it is going to be ultimates because of the 50% damage boost or 50% damage take, whatever, you can look it up online. Otherwise, it's going to clean up some kills. Whereas Graviton Surge, when used just solo and there's no follow-up with it, people can just sustain with just Reinhardt Shield. That's the difference. EMP. Really like it a lot. I don't think anyone complains about this one. The only thing that I would give it slight is it doesn't charge up super duper fast. It might charge up as fast as Minefields, but other than that, its pros just significantly outweigh its cons. It's one of those ultimates that you can't really stop it. When you EMP targets, when you remove all their abilities with nothing left to do, the person or the team that uses the MP is just going to collapse, finish off targets. Huge fight winning ultimate. I think that's the highest rated win percentage ultimate. And then the next 2 ultimates, they're a little bit different. They're not necessarily win buttons, but they definitely stop the enemy teams from winning. And Transcendence is up there. Yeah, I'm going to get it's really tough because I'm looking at the other one. If you don't know already, it'll be a surprise. But if you do know already, that's the one I'm struggling with. But Transcendence is super impactful because it's a burst healing. It deals 300 healing per second, grants immortality for what's his face, Zenyatta. So if Zenyatta's beating Dove, it's his great escape option. Grants him that extra bit of speed boost so he can heal up multiple allies if they get caught out and split up. So there's a lot of ways that Zenyatta can definitely save a fight, which makes it one of the most impactful ultimates. I think what's key about these defensive ultimates is that they can just absorb all the other ultimates. So sometimes one of these defensive ultimates can absorb 2 to 3 ultimates from the opposing side, and 1 ultimate for 3, that's a lot of value. All right, so for the reveal of the 1 ultimate that I was struggling with, Rally. I don't think it's as impactful as Transcendence. I think Transcendence is the most impactful. Rally, though, ooh, really close. Brig Rally enables her entire team to have this increased HP pool, granting 100 armor if people stay close to her, of course, and get that passive. What I think people don't realize is that when you're using Rally, it also heals them, theoretically, right? So if Brig uses her Inspire, it means that she's getting the Inspire healing while enemies within her proximity during Rally also gain armor. So it's like a stacked upon healing effect. And so the initial duration of Rally is when Rally is at its peak, where it could be honestly be as impactful as a Sound Barrier. Maybe not initially, but definitely has a longer longevity to it. It's also armor HP, and it doesn't fade away until 30 seconds or until the damage has collected enough where you just go back to your regular self. A pretty decent response to other ultimates. Again, it doesn't have that initial burst like Sound Barrier, like Transcendence, but it does have that potency where if you can sustain through it, you can likely overwhelm people because you do have that health advantage, and that health advantage ain't going nowhere, especially with a hero like Brig on the field. So yeah, that's my ranking for these ultimates. Let me know what you guys think, because this is honestly something that's a little bit controversial. I think I got most of these placements right, but it's the specifics I really want to know about. Where do you rank certain ultimates? Like, where do you rank Nano Boost? Do you rank it really high? You could, honestly, for how cheap it is compared to the rest of these, it could be up here because it comes on more frequently. You know, that's one debate you could have, one point you could point out. Things like Whittle's Infrasight. Is it more like a D low niche, only impactful for these high ranks? Let me know what you guys think. So yeah, take care. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.